filters aside, and today we're going to talk about religion. We have a lot of tarot cards to go through today to talk about religion, so I'm going to try and make this as concise as possible while giving you the information that you need to have in order to incorporate this knowledge into your readings. As someone who lives in this world, in society, especially in the United States of America, I have had a very complicated relationship with religion. Luckily for me, I got to experience a complicated relationship with more than one religion. My family is Jewish, and we have Judaic roots going back pretty far, further than I am aware of. But I wasn't really raised Jewish. I had a couple of years where I went to a synagogue. I was aware of a thing called God at the same time that I was aware of a person called Santa. And during Christmas time, we celebrated the coming of Santa. We did not celebrate Jesus or the birth of Jesus. In that sense, our Christmas celebrations were fairly pagan, mostly based on Norse practices. As I got older, I was very interested in concepts around the idea of a goddess because I saw within the Abrahamic religions that there was a huge lack of female representation. And the only female representation that was really celebrated within those religions was the virgin or someone who was making a baby, or Ruth, so I was introduced to concepts around the idea of a goddess instead of a male god, and that broadened my horizon. That was in my early teens, somewhere around there. And then I got really into like witchcraft and being very broody and telling everyone I was a vampire for a couple of years. Fast forward, I went to church and I was swept away as a Christian. I got saved and I was just so in love with this idea of being a Christian, and I felt very close to God. And I got burned pretty bad within that. So then I just didn't know what I wanted, and I just was nothing for a while. I went back and forth with Christianity for a long time and struggled a lot with the concept of feeling like I was trapped in a situation. I was having to box myself in order to fit whatever it was that the church decided was wrong with me. And for a while it was worth it because I really needed that community. And then Trump got elected. And that was the end of my ability to be around most Christians in the United States because most of them turned into openly racist, homophobic, cruel people. And for a while, I struggled with the concepts around tarot and religion because in the Bible, it says more than one time that you're not supposed to go to anyone who's a medium or who can tell the future. And to be perfectly honest with you, I can't tell you the future. I'm not psychic. Maybe I have some gifts now and then. In the church, they were called prophetic gifts. And I definitely had that outside of the church. They've been called psychic gifts. And I definitely have instances of both of those things, but I can't bring it up at will. And I certainly can't figure out which horse is going to win the races. In the Bible, it says not to mess around with people like that. And at the end of the day, no matter how I try to cut it, tarot is some sort of mediumship. Unless I'm using it only to explore psychology. But that doesn't really work for me personally because I'm not an atheist. I have had too many experiences to believe that there is no spiritual connection at all. The majority of people who have been doing this kind of work through history, not all the time, but the majority are women. I feel like the misogyny within the Abrahamic religions is so loud and apparent that it should not be a surprise to me at all that one of the things that was deemed wrong is something that women tend to be good at. Now, if you're struggling with the idea of using tarot cards, I just want you to know that there is nothing wrong with tarot. These are just cards. These are photos, pictures, drawings on paper. That's all they are. And you give them power or you choose to take it away. So if you want to use these cards for something, nothing is going to stop you, and it's not going to turn you evil. Worshiping the devil isn't something that you do casually without realizing that you're doing it. You would have to make the decision to do that. And to be perfectly honest, the devil probably wouldn't have you use tarot as the medium with which to worship him. He doesn't give a shit about being worshipped. He's the devil. It doesn't work that way. So the last thing I'm going to say about religion is that not only have I had all of these different relationships with religion, I also have dissociative identity disorder, which means my alters have different opinions on religion. And there are definitely alters who are far more Christian and still very much sit in that seat of wanting to be close to the Abrahamic God. There is an altar who is borderline, I would say agnostic, but borderline atheist. There's an altar who's very much into the fae and that side of religion. So my point is there's a lot to unpack with religion. I think if more people actually sat down and thought about what they believed in, they would have a lot to unpack too. Because of DID, because of my family, and because of experiencing more than one religion, I have been put in a situation several times in my life where I really needed to consider what I believed and why. Okay, enough about me, enough about my religious journey. Let's talk about tarot. This will in no way be an exhaustive list. I could probably go through the entire deck and tell you something about each card that has to do with some religion somewhere. I'm not doing that. I'm going to give you the top 17 cards, and some of them I'll go through pretty quick, and some of them I will take a moment on. Let's start in the same place as Genesis. The Lover's card. This card is very popular, and in this depiction you can see the Garden of Eden. You have two people there with the snake in the background and the apples or pomegranates. That's going to come up later. And you have the angel representing that this is a divine ordained meeting. We also have the Hanged Man. I'm including this one because he is a saint who has been hanged, and there is some debate about whether or not this person is guilty or not, which leads to the idea that he is a Christ-like figure, or Odin, who has a similar story about sacrificing himself for greater knowledge. The Devil. I think it's interesting that this card could be the two people from the Lover's card, because sometimes you end up being controlled by something that you have trouble walking away from because you know you're going to lose that other person. Judgment. This card is really interesting when it drops for a reading, because sometimes it means that you feel like you're being judged, and sometimes it means you're going through a spiritual awakening, which is my constant state. Just kidding, haha. I do think this card is really pretty, but in the This Might Hurt tarot deck, which I adore, this card is represented by Anubis. It should come as no surprise to anyone that I absolutely love Anubis, and that's one of my favorite cards in that deck. Here we have the High Priestess. Now her card is rich in religious symbolism, including the two towers from Solomon's temple, the Torah, the moon, and in the background, those are pomegranates. Now, if you are a Catholic, it's possible that you look at this card, you see the moon, you see the cross, you see the way she looks, the way she's sitting, the way she's covered up, and you might be thinking of some art you've seen of Mary Magdalene in the past. I know I certainly have. Here we have the Hierophant, who represents the Pope. And you can see down here at the bottom that we have these two people who are worshiping him. He has the keys of wisdom, but he's not going to give the keys to these people down here. I have a lot to say about the Hierophant, which I'll do when I do my tarot card series. But for now, the main thing you need to know is that he represents the Pope. This is the Ace of Cups, which has a ton of religious symbolism, including this dove with the communion piece. So this cup can be seen as the wine for the blood and the body. It can also be seen as the Holy Grail, which Jesus used the Holy Grail to explain the concept of communion. But to be fair, the idea of the Holy Grail also comes from a Druid practice from Ireland. In the Minor Arcana, we see the church in a very apparent way in these three cards. So you have this first one here, which is actually inside the church. It's the only card that takes place inside the church. Then you have the Three of Pentacles, where you have a group of people who are building a church together. I love that card. It's one of my favorites. And you have the Five of Pentacles, where people are outside of the church and they are either not allowed in or they are choosing not to go in because of the treatment that they have received. With each of the Ace cards, you see that there's a hand coming out of curly clouds. That represents that the gifts that are being given to you with these cards are from a divine source. So if you get this card in a reading and you're a Christian, I'm going to talk about how these gifts are from God. If you're an atheist, I'm going to talk about your higher consciousness and how the gifts are from that part of yourself that has a bird's eye view. The last two cards I want to mention here are the World and the Wheel of Fortune. Now, the Wheel of Fortune is it's so much symbolism. You have the snake for knowledge, you have Anubis, you have the Sphinx. But I'm not going to talk about those right now. I want you guys to notice the man, the eagle, the bull, and the lion. Those four creatures were specifically mentioned in the book of Ezekiel. They're also mentioned in the book of Revelations, but they come from the book of Ezekiel. And in that book, it talks about how Ezekiel, while he was quite possibly going completely insane, can see this creature that has the face of a lion, an eagle, a man, and a bull. Those are all of the cards that I wanted to show you that have some of the most in-depth religious symbolism from the Rider-Waite deck. And again, when I say religious symbolism, I'm talking mostly about the Abrahamic religions. Next week, I'm going to start a tarot course to give you some insight on how I read the cards, what I think the symbols are, and when they show up in a reading, what do they mean to me? Because we can all explain the cards or read an explanation from a book, but what we really want to know is, what does it mean when I am trying to figure out if I should quit my job and I pull these three cards? The Tarot Teaching Project will start next week, and I am very excited about it. And let me know if there are any cards that come to your mind that always seem to confuse you, because I am comfortable with every card in the deck at this point, and I'm happy to start with the card you ask about. See you then.